This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. I'm not one to make grand declarations about what the rest of the season is going to be because nobody knows what the rest of the season is going to be. We can feel one way about it. We can feel another way about it. It can be a good feeling. It can be a bad feeling, but we all don't know how this season is going to end, but we all feel how we feel about the season right now based off of what the Browns have done in the first 4 weeks of the season. And the only way I could describe how I feel about the Browns right now is I'm immensely disappointed in this entire team. We can point the finger and blame one group of people or one player individually or say that this person is more responsible than that. But what Sunday made clear is while quarterback is still a problem for the Cleveland Browns because we still aren't capable of having an offense that can score over 20 points, while wide receiver is still a problem for the Cleveland Browns because we still can't make some routine plays to help the quarterback get to 20 points. Offensive line wasn't that much of a problem actually on Sunday, so I'll actually give them a break this week. But either way, we can point the finger, we can bench Watson. It's pretty obvious that if you bench Watson, things might get slightly better, things might get a little worse, but it's not going to be a big difference. It's not going to change the season, right? Because there's so many other problems going on. Some related to the offense and some have to do with the defense. This team is a disappointment. I just find myself asking so many times, like, what happened to the team that I watched last year? Like, to the point where I have to ask myself, like, did I imagine that 2023 happened? Did I imagine that these players were still talented? Like, in 2023, the Browns were a team that took advantage of opportunities to win. If you gave the ball down 7, no matter who was at quarterback, to the 2023 Browns, they would have found a way to win a game, like against New York or against the Raiders this week. But instead, we found ways to take L's. 3 straight drives against New York. LLL. 2 drives this time against the Raiders. LL. What is going on with this team? They don't resemble the team they were last year from an energy standpoint. They don't resemble the team that they were last year from a quality of play standpoint. They don't resemble the team that they were last year from a confidence standpoint, or even from what feels like a visual speed standpoint. Like, there's nothing that when you watch this team makes you think that this is the same team last year that was capable of winning 11 games with 5 different quarterbacks. This doesn't feel like the same team despite being the exact same roster. This doesn't feel like the same coach team despite being coached by the same exact coach from last year. This doesn't feel like the same coach team on defense despite having the same defensive coordinator from last year. They should be improving on what they did last year. They should be getting better from what they did last year. Instead, I'm hearing about how each season happens in a vacuum and you can't expect to carry over things from season to season. I don't find that to be normally true. Like, something happened that broke this team, or at least makes it appear to be broken early on. And I'm just disappointed when I watch them. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this. I'm not being dramatic when I say this. The Cleveland Browns, a team last year that was good enough to win 11 games with 5 different quarterbacks, none of them that played to an extraordinary level. The Cleveland Browns look like one of the worst teams in football. If it weren't literally for the Jacksonville Jaguars, I think they'd be in the conversation. But since Jacksonville is 0-4 and lost to the Cleveland Browns, they have saved the Browns from being discussed in this way. But I really don't see this team as that different than Jacksonville. And to point out, Browns barely beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, who, again, are clearly the worst team in the NFL right now. I'm disappointed with almost everybody in every level of this football team. It is one of the most disappointing starts to the season I've ever experienced for a team that I care about, let alone the Cleveland Browns. This is just bad. I am losing faith in the coaching staff at this point. I am losing faith in individual players at this point. I'm disappointed with the quarterback play. I'm disappointed with the status of the offensive line. I'm disappointed with the wide receiver play outside of maybe Jerry Jeudy. Some people might want to add Elijah Moore to that list. Sure, I don't really care. The wide receivers as a whole haven't been that exciting for this team outside of Jerry Jeudy. Defensively, outside of Myles Garrett, I'm pretty much disappointed in everybody. Like, Zadarius Smith still hasn't really made an impact in this season. I think Dalvin Tomlinson is playing a little bit better than he did last year, but Shelby Harris is completely non-existent. And any other defensive tackle outside of Dalvin Tomlinson has been completely non-existent, non-impactful all season. Can't really count to a point to where another defensive tackle outside of Dalvin Tomlinson has made a play. Martin Emerson looks horrible to start the year, unfortunately. Greg Newsome looks fine. I think Greg Newsome's had a good start. And Denzel Ward has had a good start to the season. JOK has had great moments this season, and some great games this season, but he's also had some bad moments and a bad game here or there for himself. I'm disappointed with the energy level of this defense. I'm disappointed with the lack of schematic complexity that this defense offers, and variety that this defense offers. I watched this team on Sunday, and it feels like I got scammed. Like, it feels like this can't be the same people that wore those uniforms last year. It feels like it's impossible that these are the same athletes from the same defense that you saw, especially watching this last game. There are times where they turn it up and they get that energy going and they look like that defense from last year. The end of this game that just passed, the end of the New York Giants game, the end of the Jacksonville Jaguars game, and the last half of the Dallas Cowboys. But then there are times where they resemble what they look like under Joe Woods, which is a confused, messy unit that had too many people trying to make too many plays and did not play smart football. Like, this team went from a unit that looked impeccably well coached, very talented, very fast, to a slow defense that's undisciplined and not coached well. I don't know how they look that different the first 4 weeks of the season, but that's what they look like. It almost defies explanation. Then you look at the offense, and granted, this is probably the best week that the offense has had, but look what we're calling the best week the offense has had. We're that down with the offense that we're looking at a week where they score 16 points as one of their best weeks of the season, simply because the quarterback was not embarrassing. I don't really even want to focus on my disappointment with Deshaun Watson at this point. I've made plenty of videos about my specific disappointments with him as a player this year. And look, he had a decent game this week. It doesn't really change my overall complaints about him. But still, credit is where credit is due. This week ain't his fault as much as it is the fault of other things that were around him. But still, this offense is bad. It's really bad. We can't sugarcoat it anymore. We're excited over 16 points. We used to laugh at Pittsburgh for being excited over 16 points. Now we're excited over 16 points. The Browns last year scored under 20 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Of those 7 times, one of those were a PJ Walker start. And in 3 of those were DTR starts. So last year, when we weren't starting a practice squad quarterback or a rookie, we only scored under 23 times. Against the Rams, Joe Flacco's debut. The game where we played no starters versus the Cincinnati Bengals. And the wild card game versus Houston. 3 times. Really 2. So far, through 4 weeks, the Browns have not scored over 20 points once. Even this week, where they had a defensive touchdown. So they didn't even score 16 points this game. How is that not a disappointment, man? However those points aren't coming on the board, whoever you want to blame for those points not being on the board. The Cleveland Browns came into this year with hopes of being a Super Bowl contender by the end of the season. It feels like they're going to have to climb a mountain to even get close to contending for a Super Bowl. I am thoroughly, undeniably disappointed with pretty much everything that this year's Cleveland Browns team has offered through 4 weeks of the season. We did not expect 1-3. We did not expect a defense to crumble in on itself. We did not expect an offense that seems physically incapable of scoring over 20 points. We did not see any of this coming. This is a huge, huge disappointment and a huge disappointing start to the season. And my only hope, my only glimmer of light at the end of this tunnel here for the Cleveland Browns is that I hope that this week serves as a true wake-up call. I hope the disappointment is no longer able to be written off as, okay, well, it's just one bad game, right? I hope we're not going to be overlooking these issues anymore, at least in the building for the Cleveland Browns, simply because of blaming these outings on coincidence. It's been 4 games. It's not a coincidence. And honestly, this is who the Browns are right now. They're one of the worst offenses in the NFL. And while they aren't one of the worst defenses in the NFL, they are certainly one of the most disappointing defensive units in the NFL. This is who they are right now. If you don't like that, and if the Browns don't like that, then they really got to switch it up sooner than later. Because now, if you want to get your reputation back, this is who you have to do it against. A Commanders team that's playing great football right now. An Eagles team that's still very talented, but, they're not playing their best football either. Cincinnati, another team that's not playing their best football, but still extremely talented. The Baltimore Ravens, the Los Angeles Chargers, the New Orleans Saints, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Denver Broncos, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Miami Dolphins, and the Baltimore Ravens. It's time to get serious if it's serious in you. I don't think the season is over because the season is not over until January 7th, right? When all the regular season games are played and done, because the season isn't over until January 5th. That is, to me, when the season is over. I'm not one of these people who have the need to prematurely declare whether the season is over or not. I find that to be a bit dramatic for me and my taste personally. But that's what's going on with the Browns. This week for them is either shit or get off the pot. There's no other way to put it. And it sucks that you're only in week 5 of the season and this is where we are. But now, in order for people to believe in you, and rightfully so, you're going to have to pull some upsets. You're going to have to beat the Ravens. You're going to have to beat the Commanders. You're going to have to beat the Philadelphia Eagles. You're going to have to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. You've dug yourself into a hole that you weren't even supposed to be close to digging yourself into. It is immensely disappointing that we're at this place. It is immensely disappointing that they have played this poorly. It is immensely disappointing that a defense that looked like it did last year somehow looks like this. It is immensely disappointing that a quarterback who was top 5 once in the NFL, we are arguing had a good game because it wasn't a bottom 5 game in the NFL this week or the week or week 2 or whenever it is. It seems like we're just happy as long as the quarterback is not one of the worst quarterbacks to play all week. You know, as long as that's the case, we're happy with quarterback play. And I can't say I disagree with that outlook because I don't. Because I don't think Deshaun Watson is even better than that. I don't think he's going to get the top 5 again. So this is where they're at. They got to prove it to people now because they lost all the faith that anybody would have in them that's blind. And they lost all the goodwill that they had going into last year. I touched on this at the beginning of yesterday's video. I want to touch on it again. Last year's team knew how to win. Last year's team knew how to seize on opportunities. Last year's team felt different than this. This year's team, it feels like I'm watching it in 0.75 speed. They feel slower than I've ever seen them. They feel sluggish. They feel like they lack energy. It just something don't feel right. They got about a week to get it right. About 6 days to get it right because the season's going to get real serious and it starts this Sunday. So there's a world where they could walk out of here with an ungodly bad record by the bye week. Or there's a world where they win against the Commanders. Maybe they get David Njoku and Nick Chubb back. And then we're talking about a completely different season by the bye week. We'll see if they're just going to sit back and wait for David Njoku and Nick Chubb to do all the work to save the season, then they're going to be doomed doing that strategy. They have to realize this week how much of a disappointment they've been. Seriously. They have to realize it. There's no way to sugarcoat it. There's nothing to hide it behind. There's no scapegoat. It's just them. They've been disappointing. They don't realize that this week and they don't do something about it and start to play like the team that we saw last year, then this season is going to go down a dark place. If they do realize that and they try to seize on more opportunities and just play cleaner football and try to fix whatever's going on here, then maybe they have a shot. But right now, through 4 weeks, we're all disappointed.